I read you. Yep, loud and clear. Give me a moment and I'll read you out the now so we can get sync for approach. Warrant Officer Eudoxia Obsiski spoke into a headset as General Systems Engineer, Second-Rate Triev, walked into the command center, leaned against the doorframe and watching the current navigation head work her magic. The warrant officer held up a finger as she continued to speak. Alright, ready? Ready? Mark. Mark and sync. Cargo hauler ID code 810-165-810-887. You are currently on approach to refueling station 9 Epsilon 712, approaching from Spinward and down at 12 and 45 degrees. Please confirm? Confirmed. I'll have the station computer give you a flight path. Yep. Have a nice day. Eudoxia Obsiski pulled off her headset and began to rub the tips of her ears. Have we gotten the shipment of new headphones yet? I swear these ones are still too small. Unfortunately not. Didn't you read the memo our mayor put out yesterday? The courier ship was carrying news of the stuff. Our cargo ship hooked up with a patrol convoy and is now following them instead of making a quick run towards us. It'll be a couple days extra before we get our luxuries. W.O. Obsiski rolled her head back and groaned. Oh, that's just wonderful. I'm almost out of my good shampoo. I'll loan you some of mine. I swear, you're such a boy with how obsessive you are with your hair. The W.O. began the process of bringing up a knife hand before dropping it. The smug look of a civilian who could complain to HR if the officer began swearing diffused the oncoming rant better than any apology. Oh, just fuck off. I've got to guide this ship into dock. I swear something's up with them. They've done multiple full sets of pings. It's messing up my readings. Obsiski muttered, as Triev laughed. I'll leave you to that. Have fun. I'm going to throw you out of the airlock at some point if you keep up that attitude. HR. Fuck! Watchkeeper Selva walked into Rochal's quarters and gave the senior woman a quick salute. The captain was busy working her way through some pile of slate work and simply waved a hand, bringing the watchkeeper to ease. Who do you have in the bridge? Rochal asked without looking up. Lieutenant Senior Grade Kevchak, Selva replied. She needed time in phase, so we switched watches. I have already made my hours. Rochal nodded and waved her hand again in an accepting manner. You have my retroactive approval for this action and all that. Why aren't you sleeping? If your watch is next, you should be resting. News from the convoy, Captain, Selva replied, placing her slate on top of Rochal's desk. Right before this jump, we received word we'll be picking up a crew of engineers next jump. Something about cross-training them and our boarding marines? Rochal picked up the slate and scanned it. Engineers. The old lady of the Imperial Navy began to grin. No, those engineers. Resting on the slate above the long paragraphs of text was a simple unit marker. Well, simple was not quite the right word. A silver flower with a crossed hammer and pick atop a torch made up most of this unit's seal, but what stood out was the crowning detail. A scroll encircling the entire seal with a single phrase, Honoured by Deed. This was the seal of the sole Royal Military Unit in the entire Imperium, the only one allowed to keep that designation, instead of becoming Imperial. The Cambrian 16th Royal Corps of Combat Engineers. You know Slivers? She's a good deck officer, deft hand with a console. She's one of those snake people, the weird ones who still have warlords. I hear she's her meet raw and whole. Sliver's a good lass. I like her. She tells the best jokes. Did you hear she... I heard she is... She. Slithers, the one who was now called He of Slender Tail, felt something die every time he heard someone speak of him as she. It wasn't even malice. He hadn't shared that aspect of himself with anyone. How could he? They wouldn't understand. She. Slivers sat curled up in the corner of his bunk room. He was off shift during phase, so nobody really cared what he did, even if what he did was curl up into a ball and try to forget everything that happened. She. He remembered hearing stories from his sisters when they started suspecting he wasn't a she. Stories about the Imperium. It wasn't trying to scare him out of this, trying to make him hide who he was. Simply trying to warn him. Maybe he should have buried it, though. Hidden it more. Maybe he should become she again. She. No. Slivers recoiled at the intrusive thought. No. He'd come so far, done so much. His matriarch's clutch recognized him. To go back now, it would be like turning one's back on the Empress after she recognized you for something. I am of Den Celios, Slivers muttered, centering himself on those words. I am of Den Celios, he whispered to himself, pitching his voice down and letting the resonant subharmonics echo around the metallic room. I am of the blood of the first matriarchs, slayers of the great Synth. In my blood runs the blood of matriarchs past. On my scales is the dust of history. I am of Den Celios, and I will not be reduced to this quivering wreck by something as simple as... He trailed off, his tail flicking against the ground. As simple as saying who I am, Slivers finally finished, whispering the words into the empty room. He then spoke 3 times, once in Rattletongue, once in Trade Shill, and once in that language Cookie had been teaching him. I am he of slender tail. The male Sem spoke in the language of his mothers. I am he of slender tail. The deck officer cadet spoke in the language of his empire. I am he of slender tail. The friend spoke in the language of the one he found himself drawn to more and more and more. There is, unfortunately, one problem, Watchkeeper Selva continued after handing over the Omnislate. I assume so, Marshall replied. We have 3 jumps underway from any communication dock and our courier ship left already. This Omnislate must have been handed to you at least 2 jumps ago. The Watchkeeper didn't deny it, simply nodding. I was provided with sealed orders exactly 2 jumps ago, with directions to unseal them only now. I was also ordered to act as if they were handed to me at the next fueling station. Captain Rochelle steepled her fingers before her face, leaning forward in her chair. And you have a reason why you did not follow these commands? Sealed orders that can be withheld from the captain of a ship only come from up high in the patrol or naval command. Aye, ma'am. Last jump, this was handed to me, Selva replied, handing over a slip of paper. Paper? Paper was only used in very specific circumstances within the Imperial military. Written by hand, these were orders from high command to singular people. Secret orders. Once to be destroyed after being read and understood. The paper had a single message written on it. An order and a promise. Find Rochelle guilty of treason. Remove her. We will reward you. A simple sketch of a crown in a circle, with a pair of diamonds above it. I disobey these orders because I am not a father-fucking true crown traitor, Selva spat, as if the very words were poison. He with slender tail sat in the mess hall of the Into Harm's Way, and quietly ate his food. A combination of rich, fatty meats and tasteless nutrient slop that every non-chill crewmate ended up eating filled his plate. Oh, how it made him long for the dens and warrens of his home, of his father's food, his father's restaurant. He of slender tail remembered learning at his father's side the meals to be prepared. How to wrap succulent fruits in an armor of fried meat, how to deshell an egg so its flavour would explode when swallowed. He remembered his sisters idly teasing him for the interest in men's work, and how the fond smiles, whenever he would bring out the food, grew wistful and sad as time grew on. He remembered listening to his father's stories of his time in the patrol as a mess officer, wandering the stars, meeting new people and tasting every pleasure he could on every station he ended up at. But every time the older man would try and direct the stories to the things he of Slender Tail's sisters liked to hear, Slivers would correct him, asking to hear more of the things his dad wanted to share. Why can't you be more like Slivers? Someone called out in the mess hall, pointing towards him. The one calling was a Shorvanti in her own little den. One of them was scoffing. It was one of he of Slender Tail's fellow bridge cadets, the ship before him. She worked with Rochelle instead of Watchkeeper Selva. I still don't know what you mean, his fellow cadet said. She's, all womanly and shit. Didn't you see her in the bar brawl a few jumps ago? She threw down with a slaver and came out on top. If you want to be anything in life, you should be more like her. He of Slender Tail hunched his shoulders and curled his tail around the stool. With every word his fellow sailor spoke, it felt like he was swallowing lead weights instead of near tasteless gruel. Look, I get it that she's so much cooler than me, her fellow cadet began, but really? Slivers? She's so quiet. It's a wonder she wasn't born a boy. If he of Slender Tail thought he was eating lead before, a chunk of neutron star dropped into his belly when the other bridge cadet spoke that final sentence. With practiced ease, he checked his Omnislate. shoveled the last of his food into his jaw and took off towards his quarters with a purpose. "Bye, Slivers. Enjoy your girl time," the sailor called out cheerfully, friendly. There was no malice in her voice. And yet he of slender tail felt like the woman had just scraped off the scales on his back. Captain Rochelle steepled her fingers once more in her silent room. Watchkeeper Salva had left to begin organising preparations to receive a group of Cambrian engineers, supposedly for cross-training purposes, but the strip of paper before her put all that into doubt. She trusted Salva. The old lady of the Imperium had gotten a read on the veteran watchkeeper, and knew in her gut that this wasn't a woman to turn traitor for the promises of a husband and regular access to pleasure yachts. She was salt and steel, like the sailors of Old Shill. And yet, why the Cambrians? If the true Crowns wanted to be certain that the soldiers would happily go along with mutiny and throw her out of the airlock, wouldn't they send their own forces? The true Crowns faction had no friends on Cambria after their little rebellion involved a mass bombardment of civilian structures in the attempt to conquer the planet for more or less prestige, so why them? Perhaps it was because Sevastopolans, like Rochelle and Cambrians, had a sort of animosity. One was conquered while the other sat back and watched, after all. But that couldn't be it either. These weren't the years of strife when the inner systems of the Imperium were kept in line simply because Shill held the largest fleets anymore. Now the rivalry was fought through sports and alcohol. So why the Cambrians? It made no sense. Anything the Cambrians would do if they followed the supposed order would be seen by her command as a foreign unit coming in and... Oh. Rochelle took a moment to think that over. The Cambrians couldn't command the ship once they took it over, so they couldn't fully purge the crew like doctrine required when dealing with treasonous ships. They would need to force the sailors to bring them to port. Rochelle was popular. It was why she was sitting here instead of in a shallow grave on some back planet, courtesy of the interior. To be killed by a group only dubiously connected to the Imperium now? The story would leak and make it halfway across the galaxy before the cover story could be prepared. The Cambrians would have snapped and killed an incredibly popular commander. They would have held the crew at gunpoint and laughed as they threw her body into space. All because she was a loyal Imperial or Sevastopolvan. There would be strife, and the true Crowns would profit. "Well," Rochelle began, "I know what you want. Now let us see how I can stop you." General Systems Engineer, second-rate Triv, rested in zero gravity. Her tether to the station brought her oxygen and security as the stars glimmered in the distance. It had been a day or so since the new ship had docked up with the station, and the crew had gone along swimmingly. Some mechanical faults meant they'd be stuck here until the engine was fixed, but at least the folks knew how to play cards. "Right, Triv to engineering, I've fixed the bolts for this pipeline. Stop changing them whenever I'm off shift. Now, Triv to command, mind beginning the airlock cycling? I'm going to need to come inside for a bit. My suit's sending me some weird readings. I want to get them checked out." She paused, waiting for the reply from either station. "Did you hear me? Is my radio on? Lion says it is." She paused again. "You fuckers better not have me on mute. Right, I'm coming inside. If this is all one big prank, I'm cutting your hot water." It took a bit of movement in Eva to reach the airlock, but she's done this before. She even did it tetherless for training. She pulled the lever to begin cycling the airlock. It didn't move. She pulled it again. "You fuckers had better not be pulling a prank. This isn't funny." There was no reply.